Here is a brief introduction to our focus for the second quarter, writing fiction. Although this is just one, we also have writing drama. This is the first part. So we're going to write fiction. People love telling stories. It is a favorite pastime, often designed to inform, delight, interest, amuse, console, or enlighten the hearers or listeners. So we love storytelling. It is a basic human activity. It dates back to the beginning of time. So it is what connects us to others as human beings and what separates us from other life forms as well. So story is the telling of a happening or a series of connected events. When we tell stories or read them, we are actually educating ourselves and enriching our imagination. And one form of story is fiction. Yes, fiction. There are times when we people get bored reading about ordinary characters in ordinary places, right? So we look for materials that provide novel ways of seeing the world. And fiction provides that for us. So fiction is defined as a series of imagined facts which illustrates truths about human life. One of the misconceptions about fiction is that it is opposed to truth and therefore considered false and untrue. But it does not at all oppose the truth, because the situations, incidents, and characters found in fiction are created to illustrate what may and can happen as long as the writer does not violate the rules of probability, plausibility, and necessity. The principal types of fiction are short story and the novel. So a short story is a brief artistic form of prose fiction which centers on a single main incident and intends to produce a single dominant impression. So it's more focused on economy, compression, and emphasis. So emphasis can be emphasis on a plot or on the character or on the setting or on the theme or the message. A short story that emphasizes plot focuses on the development of the action through a complication that leads to the resolution. One that emphasizes character focuses on the inner life of an individual who usually dominates and determines the course of the narrative. A story that emphasizes setting uses a local color to show what is distinct, exotic, or picturesque in the milieu, the time and setting of the narrative. A short story may also emphasize the theme or the message to help readers understand better the significant and fundamental truths about life and human nature. So later on, if you would choose to write a short story, you can choose on these things to give emphasis on which part of the story. So another type of fiction, of course, is the novel. So a novel is an extensive prose narrative, a book-length story written in prose, usually comprising 75,000 to 100 words. Its length may range from 100 to and a plus pages. So because of its length, the novel can develop more characters, a more complicated plot, more elaborate settings, and more themes. The novelist can afford to ramble, digress, and make philosophical observations. He or she can employ numerous devices and experiment on various techniques. So we have genres of fiction. Some of you, of course, are very familiar with, or most of you are familiar with these. So we have the fable. It's a brief story that offers pointed statements of truth or explicitly states a moral. The characters are anthropomorphized animals or natural forces. Of course, Aesop's fables are very famous for that. The next is parable. So it is a brief narrative with a realistic plot. It implicitly teaches a moral. Unlike in a fable, the main characters in a parable are human beings. A parable is more serious and suggestive than a fable. Its meaning can be open to several interpretations. The Holy Bible is a rich source of timeless parables by Jesus Christ. Next would be a tale. So a tale is a short narrative that is handed down from the past. A tale contains strange and wonderful events without detailed characterization, the ones you read in fairy tales. It is also known as yarn, which aims to reveal the marvelous rather than the character. One type of tale is the tall tale, a folk tale which recounts the deeds of a superhero or of a storyteller. Then we have romantic fiction. So it is a narrative that focuses on adventures and daring actions. It is usually set in a remote time and place with a dashing hero who saves a beautiful maiden in distress. It often views life as optimistic and idealistic. Thus, it prefers a happy ending. Modern romance novels, however, can have either happy or sad endings, like those written by Nicholas Sparks and Daniel Steele. I'm not sure if some of you are familiar with these authors. Jane Austen and Ray Bradbury use more complex characters and more complicated plots. So that's romantic fiction. Then we go to realistic fiction. It is a narrative that depicts life as it is. The characters in realistic fiction are ordinary men and women, like the people we encounter on a daily basis, those with real issues realistically dealt with. Though ordinary, the characters in realistic fiction can also become heroic. So they can also become heroic in their actions. Then we also have naturalistic fiction. It is also called extreme or ultra realism. Characters in naturalistic fiction are portrayed as having little or no free will. They are mere human beasts and automatons who are victims of their own drives, instincts, and impulses. They are doomed to failure and sometimes death. One example, I know you're familiar with this, Guy de Maupassant's The Necklace, and Theodore Dreiser's An American Tragedy. Historical novel. It is a detailed reconstruction of life in another time and perhaps in another place. In some historical novels, the author attempts to depict a faithful picture of daily life in another era. History is the backdrop for a historical novel of love and heroic adventure. A historical novel recaptures the spirit and atmosphere of an age or era in the past. Certain historical events and characters can be chosen by the historical novelist to provide authenticity. Next would be science fiction. Next would be science fiction. So it deals with futuristic concepts such as a new world settings, futuristic science and technology. space and time travel, intergalactic warfare, extraterrestrial life, alien abduction, and parallel universes. Science fiction foresees or assumes inventions or technologies that are not realities at the time of the work's creation. So some movies or beautiful movies are done based on science fiction. Then we have non-realistic fiction. It involves events that cannot happen in real life because they are set in another world or some non-existent location that is very different from ours. This also includes stories that have supernatural or magic elements which are classified under the genre of fantasy or even horror. Next is non-fiction novel or fictionalized account. This is also known as reconstructed biography. It is a novel based on the true story of real people and real life events. Then we also have epistolary novel. So it is an early form of fiction told in epistles or letters. Epistolary novels usually contain letters by only one character, but at times can also contain letters by several characters in the book. So one example would be Pierre Choderlos de Laclos' Dangerous Liaisons. I'm not pretty sure if you are aware of that book. Okay, Dangerous Liaisons. Then we also have Bildungsroman or apprenticeship novel. So that is a German term. Bildungsroman is a German term for a novel of growth or development. It is a novel in which a youngster struggles toward maturity, seeking perhaps some consistent worldview or philosophy of life. It can also be the author's recollection of his or her own early life. Example would be Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. So I know maybe you are also reading this because you are at that stage where you are discovering yourself or discovering your own identity. Perhaps you could identify some of the books that you've read that would fall in this genre. Then we also have picaresque novel. So the term picaresque comes from the word picaro, which means, that's Spanish, which means rascal or rogue. It is a novel with a likable scoundrel of low social class as protagonist who lives by his wits, and who often wanders through adventures duping the law-abiding citizenry. It often adopts a realistic style with elements of comedy and satire. So Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra's Don Quixote and Voltaire's Candide, okay, are examples of picaresque novel. So there are still other varieties of fiction like mystery, detective, western, speculative, horror, and others. I hope this overview of the different genres of fiction and what is fiction, what's storytelling, would give you now an idea on how to go about writing your own fiction story, which will be your output for the first part of the second quarter. So as we go on with the lessons, I hope you will be able to come up with an idea already on what to write. Okay? So see you then.